Hello, this is Mike Lively, and this is our second video on a vision for Papervision. And basically what we're doing is we're going through the Unreal Development Kit right here, and we're saying this is what Papervision should look like. Now, of course, in action scripting you lose a factor of performance, but we're not necessarily interested in building C++ games. What we're interested in building are web development environments, and you can certainly do that in Papervision very nicely in 3D, but Papervision is too hard to program, so there has to be a different model or approach, and I'm saying, hey, let's take a look at Unreal, which has a wonderful interface, and let's build something like it for 3D. So last time we were building this little wish list of things we want Papervision to do, and in the wish list we said, well, we should have gizmos, we should have pixel bender dynamic lighting, and we should have a content browser which gives you the ability to drag and drop images onto different 3D objects. So in this recording we're talking a little bit about mouse navigation. We're going to show you how to build a terrain, add some lighting to it, modify it, and add textures. So let's get to it. So I have the Unreal Engine up right now, and I want to add a terrain. So let's go ahead and go to Tools, go to New Terrain. And let's hit Next. And finish. And what's going to happen over here in the background, you see you've actually built this little terrain, and that's what we're going to be working with. And now to work with this terrain, go ahead and hit the terrain key right here. It brings you into terrain editing mode. Click on that. Up comes your little terrain panel. And I can actually change this to a wireframe, so let's click on toggle wireframe. So now it's a wireframe. And if you don't like the number of pixels in there, you can actually tessellate it or create double this number of pixels. So I'm going to hit increase, that's the tessellation. And you got to be careful with tessellation because I just doubled the number of vertices, but what happens? Well, what happens is with double vertices, there's double processing. You may not see the performance hit in C++, but with action scripting you definitely do. So be careful with that tessellation button. Now that we have the kind of a little terrain here, there's not much to it, let's talk a little bit about mouse navigation. So here's the rules for some simple mouse navigation. Holding down the right mouse button will allow you to rotate in the Y direction and Z direction. Holding down the left mouse button will translate across the surface. Let's demonstrate that. So let's go to our image. So if I hold down the right mouse button, it actually allows me, in a sense, to rotate my surface up and down. Okay, let me translate with it with the left mouse button. So it gives you translation across the surface. So if I suddenly want to rotate it up so I can actually see it, I just rotate it up like that. See? Now I just rotate it completely horizontal with the right button. And with the left button, you just translate it along the surface. Let's rotate it back down with the right button. Okay? So just remember that. You want to go left, right. It's kind of like driving a car with 2 feet. So you can actually click with one to translate and with the other to rotate up and down and around. Okay, so remember that, and you can position your mesh any way you want to. And what we're going to do now is actually going to add some mountains and valleys to this mesh. So once again, let's go to the terrain editor, and let me explain a little bit about the editor itself. So I'm in the terrain editor right now, and I want to show you some of the important aspects of it. Right here we have a whole series of tools which will allow us basically to paint the surface dimensions or levels. And let's go over here. We have basically some brushes that you can select that will allow you to actually grab some pre-selected strength, radius, and fall off right here. So if you look at that, as you change these different button brushes, you get different values up here, and you kind of have a Gaussian fall off as well right here. So sometimes I'll hit a button and I don't like the strength, so I'll just change the strength a little bit. So that'll help you as we do this. So let's go ahead and paint the surface with basically a height dimension. So we're going to come here and hit the paint brush. Let's choose a brush. We'll choose this one right here, and I like the strength a little lower than 100. Okay, and we'll just go right to our surface. And what's cool here, you'll see this little red dot that shows you kind of the dimension that you're drawing over. So now what I'm going to do is hold down the control key and the right mouse button, and that pushes the surface down. You see that? But when I hold down the control key and the right mouse button, it actually pushes the surface up, so you can actually build little hills and stuff. And so we're now kind of trying to build something up. So let's look at some other features of the control panel. So here's the terrain editor. Now what I can do right here is actually flatten the mountain out at its regular height. So I come along here, I'm going to roll over my flatten button, hit the control key and start drawing, and see it flattens everything out. Alright? Here's another nice little useful tool right here. If I want to average things, so I hit the average button right there, and maybe I want to create a little highway or flatten this out a little bit so I can actually kind of averages the mountain so it brings it down. And then if you want to create some random mountains, you click right here, and that's a randomizer. So you can roll over here, for example, and just randomize terrain. Let's roll around a little bit and see what we did. There we go. I'm going to roll back and then come all the way around and see the other side. There you go. And there I was randomizing. And we can randomize some more so you can see how that works. Hit the control key to randomize. And there we're randomizing. Very good. So at this point we've made our terrain. Let's add a light to it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to close the terrain editor because without that I keep getting this little ball and circle. So I'm going to close that and you can see everything goes back to a little cursor. And it's very easy to add a light, of course. Right click on the terrain and just hit add actor. And let's add a dominant directional light. And this is pretty cool. Let me use this translation gizmo to move it around. But then come along and hit this rotation gizmo and actually can change the basically direction. And see how the shading changes? Isn't that super cool? Let's give it a little bit of shading. That actually looks pretty cool. Alright, so we've added our light. Now let's go ahead and add some terrain. And it's actually a three-step process. Let me bring that up so you can see that. So in adding a material to the terrain that I've created, I've got to create a material layer. I've got to add the material holder to a layer. And then I have to add a material to the holder. So that's the way I like to think about it. It's probably not in technical terms for this, but you have to create something like a layer. Then you have to put a holder for the material in that layer, and then you have to add that material. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Come along, let's bring up our terrain little editing box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a terrain here. So right here at the bottom you see height map. Let's right click on this. It says new terrain setup layer. Click on that. Let's give it a name. We'll just call it terrain 1. Is going to put it in package 0 right here. So it's going to create a package and it's going to give that a name. And hit OK. And then I want to put my material holder in the terrain. So let's go ahead and right click on that and hit new terrain material. And let's give it a name. We'll call it terrain 2. And click OK. And now what I want to do is add the material itself. So where do I go to get that at? The content browser. So let's go there. And let's bring up our content browser. And you can see terrain 2 right there. That's actually where I'm going to put my particular layer. So if I go to terrain 1 and I right click and I hit properties, you can see right here that the package right here is holding terrain 2. That's my layer and it's holding terrain 2. So I need to put the layer or the material in terrain 2. So if I right click on the terrain 2 and I go to properties, I can see that there's no material inside of its properties material holder. And I want to put something there. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go to the content browser. Go to Cool Materials, let's select a terrain, and just hit Add. And you can see right there it's added that new terrain. And if you go to your height map, you should actually see it. And you can see in our height map, we now have the new material. Looks pretty cool. And what I want to do now is I want to add a material under that material so I actually can paint it onto that material. And by adding that second material, you'll actually be able to get a fire effect like you see here in the image right here. We actually have fire coming up from the ground. And what that is, that's a second layer that has in a sense been painted through. So you can actually do this in Flash by using a blend mode. And it's very possible to have such cool effects like this just with a little bit of programming. So, oh, isn't this nice? And we'll complete this exercise in the next video. So thanks for listening. This was Mike Lively.